Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So after hours in the shop video tonight, I haven't done one of these for quite a while, several months matter of fact, but some interesting conversation came up in the comment section below the last 1113 video, and a couple of the responses, or a couple of the comments I should say, would have led to such discussion that I would have been there typing for an hour and probably two people would have read it, or we could make a after hours in the shop video about it, have a little bit of back and forth, some good discussion, some valid points brought up. It's been a long day. So that's what we're going to do here tonight. Stay tuned. So in the last 1113 installment, where I made the decision to use all of those gear set components out of this later 5U transmission to replace the worn and or rusted damaged ones in the first gen 1113 transmission. You can see I have both those side by side once again. A few extra parts and pieces on each of them, so that's all going to factor into the story here shortly. But a lot of very good comments arose from the differences I pointed out between that later 5U case and like top cover shifter, all that other stuff, versus the less refined first gen versions on 1113. And yes, there are a lot of upgrades, a lot of improvements in ergonomics, and a lot more convenience items built into the later U-Series tractors. And one comment in particular kind of touched on a lot of points that I could expand upon. It was put up by Christopher Miller. It's kind of a long one. I'm not going to try and fit it on screen here for you. I'll just read it. So he writes, "You say you're going to use the 1113 transmission case. If the later 5U is a better case with all the improvements you noted, wouldn't you be inclined to use it? Same with the top plate with the dipstick. If 1113 is not going to be a quotations show queen, and you are not going to keep it in its original configuration, new wider tracks, etc., where is the line on making it as stock as possible and it being as functional as possible for your intended uses? I'm speaking as a 76 Jeep CJ5 owner who tries to keep it looking stock, but is not adverse to making it better since that iteration / model ran from then through 83, so there is a lot of things that were corrected each year." Let's go. First off, very good comment, and I did ask him. He did give me permission to use that in this video, so thanks for that. My ideal goal with 1113 is to keep it as correct as possible to the parts manual for that serial number of machine. Now, when I put like wider track pads on it, or a PTO, or a belt pulley, or a front tow hook, or a belly pan, on and on and on and on, like I have a lot of those things are planned, it's not necessarily an upgrade, and it's not necessarily taking it away from the stock factor, because all of those pieces are listed in the parts manual for that serial number of tractor. They are not necessarily upgrades as much as options. So if it is a Cat factory option, correct for that model year, correct for that serial number, correct for the application, I have no problem at all using that, putting it on there. That being said, first gen parts, a lot of them are different from later generation parts. And these 5U pieces in this gear set, namely ring and pinion, bevel gear hub, things like that, they are a significant departure away from what the original components were in 1113. If I had access to brand new, still in Cosmoline, or new from the dealer, first gen accurate components for 1113, I would sure as everything use those first, even if they cost a lot more money than known good second gen, later generation parts that I already had on hand, because that is the goal, keeping it as true correct as possible to first gen iterations. So that's case in point. One reason why I was delighted to have that smaller, thinner clutch disc to fix up the main clutch for 1113 over going with the later U-Series clutch disc that was thicker and had the different pressure plates. And granted, out of necessity, that's what a lot of people have to resort to using now, because that's what's still available. But that's another instance where I was able to keep it correct as per parts manual, and everything that I ended up having on hand, from that new old stock clutch disc to several sets of first gen pressure plates, allowed me to keep it in its original form. You know, there's a difference between adding options, like I said, that were still correct, and then just plain doing upgrades that take away from the original design or configuration of the tractor. So we'll turn to the props that I set out here real quick. I just, with a rag under everything, because I've been cleaning on 1113's case and I didn't really want to go backwards by throwing a bunch of dirty parts on top, but I've placed the first gen shifter that is the higher model, and then also the first gen steering clutch levers. Now, whatever fell on 1113 back in the day took this left one and bent it out severely. It should be straight up and down as an arrow like the right one. So just pretend that that's actually straight up and down right now. That's the way that's supposed to be. That's another repair in my future. We're not doing that tonight, but for sake of conversation, I also placed the later style 90-degree low profile shifter onto the 5U case, and the steering clutch levers that are correct also for that application. Those are the later 5U levers, and you can see each one of these dives in, a good couple inches, as well as fitting well with this 90-degree low profile shifter. Not only is that shifter down and out of your way, but they also narrowed up where the steering clutch levers are, and when you're sitting on one of these, well, you're about right where we're standing right now. There's a lot more room for your legs to go down each side of those steering clutch levers because the footwell plates are there and there. And, you know, when you're pulling these things all the way back, even these narrower set-in levers are still coming pretty close to your legs. Whereas the early first gen 5Js, yeah, the shifter's a lot higher. You know, getting on and off, you can bang your knee into it. If you're bucked over a bump, you could come out of the seat and hit that. It's, you know, possible. That's why you want to have a good knob on there. This one, of course, is gone. But with the steering clutch levers out so far, of course, not as far as this one. Remember, it's supposed to be straight. But, you know, you pull back and get full travel on those levers, you're actually having to kick your leg out a little bit more because you just don't fit on the machine as well. So, you know, that right there, that's a lot more comfortable and user-friendly setup. But, asterisk, that's not true to the original design of 1113. You know, so every one of these machines has its own personality. They have their own quirks, and there's a lot different feel. We'll go back to like convenience items. That dipstick that I showed you for checking case oil. Of course, the 5U cases have the same level plug on the side as what the first gens do, but the first gens just don't have a provision for that dipstick. So, that being said, yes, it's a lot more convenient having a dipstick for your gear oil, but take my 5U 7066, the Iron Mistress. I was through that D2 completely front to back. Everything's been resealed, everything's been tightened up, everything's back to spec, and because nothing leaks and everything operates like it should, do you know how many times I've actually had to top off the gear oil in that thing? 0. So it gets checked because I have a dipstick right there. Boom. I can make sure the level's good whenever I want, and I do. It's not really necessary, but it's a convenience item. One clear-cut benefit to it is you can pull that. You can immediately assess condition by just looking at what comes off the stick. It's a little bit harder because you got to pull the side plug on these early first-gen cases, put a tool in there, pull it out, you know, makeshift dipstick. And like I said, you're fighting tracks and roller frames and stuff. But there's, when you're kind of a pain in the butt like I am, you're a little bit touched, you know. And like you've looked at all the books, you know what all the differences are in the machines. I'm not trying to say I'm like super smarty pants, anything like that. But when I walk up to a tractor, I see all these little cues. It's like even from a distance, I can look and see, is that straight steering clutch lever or are they kicked in? Is that a higher up shifter? Is that a lower 90? Oh, so even at a glance from a distance, I'm already putting together, oh, maybe that's got to be a 3J, 5J, 4U, 5U. And then as you walk up on it, you know, you can get better confirmation. And yeah, so I'm assessing these things at a distance immediately. And if I started, you know, putting all these upgrades on 1113, to me, that kind of takes away from the novelty factor of the machine. Granted, it's not going to be as comfortable to run as a later 5U, but to an extent, it's going to be more fun because you're getting more, I guess, in my mind, the early first-gen J-Series tractor experience. It sounds minuscule, it sounds kind of dumb, but I just like keeping things stock form. So whenever we can put these things together with all first gen components, we'll do it. If we have to step outside of that and use later generation components, I will only do it as far as is absolutely necessary. Once we have cleared that hurdle, we go back to using all the first gen components as possible. So I'm not at all worried about using this first gen case that doesn't have the extra webbing out here to the steering clutch actuator bores. I'm not a bit averse to using the first gen bearing caps that don't have the extra gusseting in them, because everything else, engine, clutch, everything through the transmission is still the early lower power D3400 first generation stuff. And some of those improvements in strength weren't needed for that power output and just aren't needed. So it doesn't bother me a bit keeping it absolutely stock. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit long-winded. That's the best way I can put it. So another person that put it in a nutshell way better than my long-winded brain could ever do was the Metal Butcher. He says, Squatch 253, it twitches my eye that you don't use the one that makes your life easier. It twitches my, I see what you did with that one. That's pretty good. Oh, well, I guess it's a slippery slope until you end up with a 5U. And that's what I've spent about the last 6-7 minutes trying to explain, because yeah, we could go with the updated top cover with the dipstick, but as long as we're doing that, we might as well go with the lower slung shifter. But then the lower slung shifter doesn't give you as much benefit as the inset steering levers. But then, you know, if we ever wanted to put hydraulics on, these early stamped steel surrounds didn't have a provision for a life power pump, so we might as well see if we can retrofit a 5U shell on there, or radiator surround that has the heavy cast bottom with the provision already built in, but then that's not going to fit the front cover. So maybe we can make a 5U front cover fit the block, or let's just put a D311 on the front and then boom, you've got a 5U. That's, you know, on a tractor, that's a little bit of an extreme example, but that's how close you are. That's about all it really takes to having something that's not really a 5J, but not really a 5U either. And granted, we're having to do that to a tiny extent out of necessity, but we're trying to stay away from that as much as possible. But there were several other comments about, you know, doing the resto mod to automobiles. I heard like Mustangs, the Jeep, pickups, and I guess my opinion to comparing tractors to automobiles is still kind of like comparing apples to oranges. They are kind of two different animals altogether, and they're operated in very different environments. So like an old D2, it's never going to be on a professional job site. It's not going to be in production mode really ever again. It's just kind of a toy that maybe goes to the back 40, sometimes a show. It's still in a roped off, rather safe area, or it drives down a parade route. Whereas an automobile, you're going to have that thing out on the road with other people. You're going to be driving a lot more for safety concerns there. And I don't blame anybody one bit for upgrading brakes, for upgrading lights, for maybe going with a better engine drivetrain. You know, I think that's smart, because old drum brakes and no power steering and dim lights, and they did leave a lot to be desired back in the day. And especially when you're on the road with other people that have all those modern conveniences, yeah, I wouldn't blame you a bit for wanting to have a resto mod that still looks the part, but like the Metal Butcher says, it does make your life easier at the end of the day. But like I said, in my mind anyway, tractors, automobiles, kind of like apples to oranges. You know, hope that makes sense. So I think that's pretty much going to wrap this episode of After Hours in the Shop. I know it wasn't as broad topic-wise as it usually is. I usually try and squeeze in 2-3 different topics, but this one kind of led to enough discussion to make a video, and it's pretty much relevant to the current feed. So yeah, goal with the project. If it's in this book, I still consider it all being stock. So, because it's something that could have come on 1113 back in the day, and we're sticking to that book as much as possible. So, and I've said it before, unfortunately, with the parts availability of these units, good used in, well, more and more areas all the time is the best you can hope for. So yeah, I've got parts from a lot of different machines into 1113. We have 3J1113 beer can engine parts in this. We have 5J2115 parts in this. We have 1113 parts in this. We have, we're going to have 5U parts in that transmission. The trouble is, that's how you shop for a lot of these parts anymore. So luckily, I was able to get up, well, I was able to call Cat today. I was able to get the cups and cones, the bearings and races for that bevel gear shaft. They still had those in stock. They're a couple days out, so I'll be going to get those. I can't do any transmission assembly until those are here anyway, but You know, you get lucky a lot of times like that, but other times, if you can't find new old stock, you have to run the best of what you got. So, and that's kind of, well, that is the reason why I've said a couple times, 1113 is probably going to be the last real full rebuild I ever do on a D2, because I've been collecting lots of new old stock, lots of good parts here and there for probably 15 years for a build just like this that we're doing now. And even with that effort having been expended, there's still a lot of things that I haven't been able to find new. So it's still possible, but it's getting harder by the day. You know, it's one of those things where it takes more and more work to get these things put back together all the time. So not trying to be down or anything. That's just kind of the nature of the beast anymore. So thanks for watching, everybody. Hope this wasn't too long-winded, and hope you stuck with me up until this point. So as always, thanks for watching. Hope to see you back again.